Today, a deadline expires, but what happens now remains as clear as the fog of war. Russia has run out of time to meet the Trump-imposed deadline to end its years-long fight in Ukraine. Bombs are still flying, but the economic sanctions President Trump promised to punish Moscow may still be in the holster. And a meeting between Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky, that's no longer a precondition to a meeting with the American president.
President Putin said this morning he was pretty dismissive of this idea of meeting with President Zelensky. President Putin was.
I don't know.
So for you to meet with him, he doesn't have to agree to meet with Zelensky. Is that what you're saying?
No, he doesn't. No.
So when do you think that meeting will happen?
They would like to meet with me, and I'll do whatever I can to stop the killing.
CNN's Kylie Atwood is now joining the panel. And it's your birthday. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this big day. Can you just put into perspective, we're going to look at the broader globe right now, but on what's happening right now
over the last few days, the stories on whether or not these sanctions on Russia were going to go into place has changed. And so initially, after Trump's special envoy met with President Putin, White House officials were still saying these sanctions that the president promised on Friday are still going to effect. Well, then they slowly started to shift what they were saying on that. The Secretary of State said that that's going to be up to the president. The president himself yesterday said it's going to be up to Putin. So at this moment, I just talked to a senior administration official in the last hour. They still don't know if those sanctions are going to go into effect. It's clear that they are putting a lot of emphasis on this potential Trump-Putin meeting, and so maybe putting sanctions into place could make that not happen. But I've also talked to folks today who say, listen, put those sanctions into place because that gives Trump leverage at the negotiating table with Putin if they do actually have a conversation to try and drive an end to this war. We have to watch and wait to see, but the administration doesn't seem like it is eager right now to actually follow through on that sanctions deadline.
Russia launched a new wave of drone attacks on Ukraine just ahead of a critical deadline set by President Donald Trump. Trump had said that Russian leader Vladimir Putin must agree to a ceasefire with Ukraine by today or face severe new sanctions. However, it's unclear whether he will follow through on that threat. Both countries are preparing for a possible summit between Trump and Putin, but the time, place, date yet to be announced. Trump says including Ukraine's president is not in the talks, not a precondition for those talks. He's just ready for the war to end. Listen.
They would like to meet with me, and I'll do whatever I can to stop the killing. So last month, they lost 14,000 people killed last month. Every week is 4,000 or 5,000 people. So I don't like long waits. I think it's a shame.
Meanwhile, in Ukraine, more than 100 Russian drones, including new jet-powered ones, hit at least 10 different locations right across the country. Officials there say 3 people were killed in the last 24 hours alone. Nick Payton-Walsh joins us now live from Kyiv with the latest. And Nick, I am very curious to hear from you and to lay this out from us. If there is a meeting, depending on who attends and how it unfolds, what can possibly be achieved?
Yeah, I mean, look, just to remind everyone, we have kind of been here to some degree before, back in May, when a trilateral summit, Trump, Putin and Zelensky, was proposed for Istanbul and Putin rejected it. We've now gone today from this essentially being a deadline into which secondary sanctions, already announced for a few weeks from now against India, but potentially against another customer of Russian energy, China, that they were meant to be unfurled. That could still happen in the hours ahead, but instead the narrative is very much switched towards this potential for a Trump-Putin meeting. Zelensky doesn't have to be part of that, as you said, for that to go ahead. Undoubtedly a win for the Kremlin to have that bilateral without kind of preconditions. And we've clearly seen Vladimir Putin on the phone a lot today, speaking to China's Xi Jinping. The readout of that suggested that Beijing was pleased to see US-Russian relations improving. And indeed, Prime Minister Modi of India has been on the phone with Putin as well. Also, the readout from that suggesting that India maintains its desire to see a negotiated settlement here. So is that pressure from the two nations that might be hit by these secondary sanctions for their Russian energy purchases, trying to get Russia to the table? Unclear. Publicly, they've shown some element of resistance to that kind of pressure. But we've also heard from the Polish President, Donald Tusk, echoed by Volodymyr Zelensky here, that ceasefire may indeed be near or closer than it is far away. Hard to always pass what's going on behind this language, but clearly a lot of movement. What we don't know yet is there going to be a bilateral meeting? When will it be? The Kremlin seemed to suggest expedited timing and planning in the last 2 days about that, but we still don't have a place or a date. And until indeed we have that, the White House can't be assured that they're not seeing again the Kremlin trying to just string them along, to paraphrase President Trump there. This is a matter of days and weeks being important to Russia here. They're seeing progress on the front lines and places that they have made clearly part of their war goals. And it's simply a case of having this diplomatic process continue, avoiding secondary sanctions. It's all a win for Russia at this point. And the pressure, I think, now on President Trump from his European allies, from Ukraine, to go ahead with some kind of consequences for Russia. But just a reminder, back in May, European leaders came here, demanded an unconditional ceasefire, said they had the backing of President Trump and he would impose sanctions with them if that didn't happen. It didn't happen. Trump didn't impose sanctions and instead launched into a lengthy process of talks in Istanbul that ultimately went nowhere. So much of a sense of deja vu here. What is certainly new, though, is Russia's progress on the front lines, which may explain their sudden appetite for talks when they happen, though. The ultimate question here, Paula.
Yeah, in that context, it's incredibly important as we wait to hear more from the White House. Nick Payton-Walsh for us in Kyiv. Sitting where I am right now, I fail to see what the administration could possibly get out of this meeting. They obviously feel differently. Do they know differently? What am I missing here?
Well, Donald Trump has a belief in his magical powers of negotiation. This he said over and over again. He wants to get into a room with Vladimir Putin. He thinks he can end the war. That's what he wants to do. The details, I think, are not big in his mind. I think he's after a big media event. I think he wants a ceasefire. I don't think he cares so much about the war ending so much as it's stopping. And I think Putin, you talked about this deadline. Putin very cleverly, as usual, has bought himself more time. By raising this question of a meeting, he's put off any question of more sanctions on Russia. We don't know exactly what Steve Witkoff discussed with Putin last week or earlier this week that caused this meeting to happen. But clearly, Putin thinks he can get something from it. The discussion may be about lines of defense. If you're going to have a ceasefire, you need to have pullbacks. Russia still wants to take over parts of Ukraine. It hasn't won by military force yet. Ukraine wants to get back parts of its territory, like the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, where Russia's occupied the territory. So there's stuff to change. But I mean, already Donald Trump, even before this, had pretty much conceded to Putin that he could keep the territory that he has right now, and that he could keep Crimea, and that Ukraine wouldn't join NATO. So already lots of concessions were made. The worry, obviously, that Zelensky has is that Putin and Trump will come up with something that they will try to impose on him, and he will be in a very uncomfortable position.
And you can understand why that worry is warranted. You made an interesting point there, that Putin may be interested in stopping the war, but not ending the war. And that's when I turn to sanctions. Do you think the Trump administration will give any teeth to any of the sanctions going forward, whether they are secondary sanctions, whether it's going to be against India or China?
I don't really. I mean, I'd like to be wrong. The Trump people haven't even renewed the sanctions on Russia that are pre-existing to make them more up to date. Trump's angry at India anyway, so he's imposed big tariffs on India, partly because it buys so much Russian oil. He won't do the same with China because tariffs on China are already 50%. So I mean, it's very hard to imagine them going up more. So I think his leverage on Putin is pretty minimal, frankly, but Putin sees Trump as an instrument to get what he wants, which is pressure put on Zelensky, because I don't think Putin's main aims for the war have changed. He wants a Ukraine that is more of a vassal state, that has less military, that won't join NATO, that is much more like Belarus, which he kind of controls, than it is like Poland. And I think that is something Vladimir Putin isn't going to give up on.